So I want to talk about an actual use for designing one idea I have, and a few of them actually, for designing a better rocket. Now, few rockets have led to better Wi-Fi. They've led to better weather reports, and things that have really helped a bunch of people. Ultrasound is actually something that's related to rocketry, but they have a lot of hurdles, which makes them not the best. After all, this is saying it's rocket science. One of them that people don't know or think about is actually has to do with the fuel tank. Now, there's many problems that can happen in the fuel tank. One is that if we were to store the best, storing fuel, you want to keep the fuel compressed for a couple reasons. And one of them is if a fuel is just a gas, you can't pump it quickly enough to the engine to fuel the engine fast. So that's why you use solid or liquid fuel. But then if you stop pumping out a lot of liquid, then the tank becomes mostly empty and some of it turns gas or starts slushing around. So and this has actually been making the starships explode a lot lately. So how do I propose to fix that without adding too much weight? Well, one old idea is that you would pump in pressurized helium, but that's a lot of extra weight because that's not fuel, and you have to really keep under pressure. And helium actually is very expensive at that amount. Not a little bit for helium balloons, but at that amount, and liquid, which they use and they depressurize it, they use helium because it's so not corrosive and that it expands a lot from being cold to not, so you can really pressurize it. It also has very nice properties and stays about the same space, like acts really like an ideal gas that's very predictable for long temperature range. But back to the basic task. Well, my idea is you have a blow up barrier in the middle of the tank and you turn some of your fuel into gas. Use that to compress your gas and push it down. This is similar to an autogenous autogenous pressure pressurizing system, which means you use the same fuel, so you can save a lot of fuel and then potentially even use that gas to it if necessary. And it's what they're trying to use in a lot of rockets, but they've had really bad luck. The space shuttle used it a little bit. The problem with the system simply is that if you slush around a lot, the gas and liquids can mix. Also, you have to do it very well temperature controlled because you need the gas to be about the same amount of the liquid. Now, you might be like, oh, gases are a lot less higher temperature. Well, not exactly. If you boil water, the steam can be 100 degrees and so can the water be 100 degrees Celsius. But it's a complicated system and lots can go wrong. That is a valid criticism, and that's why it keeps having problems. And gas in the fuel can cause damage into the engine when it mixes in the engines and just causes like bubbles that explode and stuff like that, or causes fuel not to be mixed evenly. And then leftover unburned fuel can damage it because you could have extra oxygen that's hot that reacts to stuff, or extra hydrogen gas. All these other problems. So my thing is, why don't we have an inflatable spacer in the middle? Inflatable because I want it to move easily up and down. So metals will be very hard to put into this thing. Metals first would weigh a lot more. But other things is they could scratch the container when they go up and down more. They're a lot harder. They also swing differently with temperature. And if there's a lot of temperature fluctuations, they could swing differently. With vibrations, they could have a lot of problems with banging around in there. And the milling of it needs to be a lot more precise because you have to fit really precise to really make it block. But if you have something inflatable, it can make it out of material that most likely scratch up the place and stuff. There might be small leaks, but it's not going to scratch it. It's going to stay stuck in it no matter if there's vibrations or anything. It's not going to bang around and cause a lot of damage. Like an airbag doesn't cause a lot of damage in something if it bangs around. And if it's thick, it would be a pretty good seal. And it could even allow for different shapes where the diameter of the whole thing changes down the tank, unlike a solid metal that can't change diameter. And it can handle thermal expansions a lot more easily, or contractions. To make this blockage thing even better, what I propose is that this blockage has certain structure which I kind of try to, but I'll draw it back better, that looks like this, with different compartments of things filled with gas. So each of these little closed off things has gas. And if we push pressure in one way, it does not resist change. It gets squished, and sorry, I'm going to draw a little more here. It squishes and scuffles more because some of it's more collapsible, and that gets in the way and makes more friction and makes it hard to move. However, if we do it this way, these folds and stuff don't collapse as much in the way that gets away, and it can move much more easily. This means the piston you can force the piston down with gas and it stays in place. This leads to, and it doesn't go up when you're squishing it around, which is very most important when you're doing walking maneuvers and you're flipping inside, or something, and the liquid can go everywhere. It's to stop all the sloshing stuff. A lot of rockets actually have in the tanks little metal pieces that act to start sloshing, and they just disrupt, like when liquids hit them, they don't slosh around the whole tank, they just hit it and lose some of the energy, but that's adds a lot of weight and complexity and lowers the speed you can pump stuff. But this will be a way to get rid of that and keep it compressed. The other thing is you can force gas down, move this piston down a little bit, then you can take some of the gas you force it down, pump it back out, and put it back into the liquid, because it's a little bit now stuck there. So you don't need to keep all the gas you use to force down it. It has a hard time going back up. Now, the other thing about autogenous pressurization, its advantage is you can recycle some of the gas from the top and make it into liquid again and put it back into the tank. This requires cooling in outer space, which is a really big challenge at this moment, because the problem with cooling is, yes, outer space can be colder, but it's a lot harder to lose heat because you can't lose heat to the air or to the ground. You have to radiate it out, which is a lot harder. Then you can have the sun, which can really heat up stuff fast, or other radiation. The other major idea I have for this whole thing, and repressurizing it would, if there's any leaks in this system at any time because it's sloshing around, that will help get rid of the leaks. The other idea I have for this system has to do with hydrogen gas. Now, hydrogen gas, there's a huge problem with using it in rockets. Liquid hydrogen. Hydrogen is so small, and it also interacts with stuff, that it can go through even metals. And it can go through a lot of things. It slowly goes through it, but it can leak through it. Solid pieces of metal. By filling the gaps, and also it can form temporary bonds with the metal that lets it travel from one metal. I'm just going to put M for metal. It forms a bond there, then it attaches to another piece of metal, aids, and slowly moves through it. This can also not only make it move through the metal, it can cause the metal to crack or have or other problems and get more brittle, fracture, and it's all a very slow process, but a real process. And the higher pressure you go, the more of a problem it is, and the more banging around. Now, hydrogen is also better fuel because it gives a lot more energy, it burns more cleanly, more energy per rate, but you also have to keep it under higher pressure. How do I propose to fix this? Well, sometimes these tanks are not made out of metals, but they can be made out of ceramics, certain carbon composites, or plastics. You would have to find one that can withstand the cold temperatures. But let's say you find one that can stand the cold temperature and pressures. Why not make it a different amount throughout the whole entire material, a different amount of permeable to not permeable to hydrogen, or it bonds to hydrogen a different amount. Now, what happens when something moves? That means that if the outer layer it moves quicker than the inner layer, something happens and it starts to curve in on itself. This is the same thing. You can imagine this is if you're walking and you hit a muddy path, or any path at all that is slower, your leading edge slows down first and the other edge goes faster and you start turning into it. Or the opposite, if you hit something going faster, you start turning away from it. To give I'm just going to draw a little guy to show that. This little guy, this is just his feet. He's walking, then he hits this mud patch. This foot hits first, slows down, so the other foot pivots and turns, and he turns into it. So this is the core idea about having something with different permeabilities and stuff, is that at first it goes faster through the material with less resistance, but then when it hits the material, as it slows down, it starts curving away and more away, and it could curve all the way out of the material. And because it's not getting really deep into it, and the outside of it is more porous and more conductive, that the brittlement doesn't matter as much, because there's more spaces for hydrogen to hang out safely. While deep in where the hydrogen can really disrupt the structure, it doesn't. And polymers can have, unlike metals, polymers have less of an ordered structure in some ways, so they can handle this disorder more. So we can have polymers or graphite or carbon composites, or maybe ceramics. Ceramics not as much, because ceramics are brittle and don't interact with hydrogen the same way. This has been used for turning around. These ideas, principles of selectively slowing down fluid medium, have been used in everything from optics to trap light, to trapping sound waves in materials, to trapping beams of liquids, turning it around, reflecting it and stuff, to any much more. So it should work. Also moving particles. The way you could do this with a polymer is you could make this the outside less dense of the polymer, and less dense so hydrogen can move more easily. The inside more dense. You can also make this have less hydrogen bonds. Less hydrogen, not less hydrogen bonds, but less hydrogen in the polymer, because polymers contain hydrogen in their structure. They have elements bonded to a bunch of hydrogen, and it can have other things that bind to hydrogen more strongly as you go down the polymer. All this can be controlled and give you a gradient, and there's ways of actually making polymers have a gradient of different properties slowly from inside to out. Polymer tanks could also be more easily blown up to shape outside, and can be made to be less conductive of heat. Another advantage. I hope you found this interesting. Please like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out. I'm trying to reach 1,000 subscribers in a year, 4,000 watch hours, which is really hard. But with your help, I think I can do it. Also, if you have any ideas for future videos, any comments, criticism or anything, leave them in the comment section below. And if you know my DMs, feel free to DM me. Thank you very much. Goodbye.